Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dylan Blake, and I'm so excited to be your host today for today's book launch celebration. As we get started here, I'd like everyone, if you can, drop a quick note in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from and why you came today. We're encouraging all of you, ask questions as we go through the session today. And while I can't promise that we're going to get to answer all of these in the 30 minutes that we have together, we would love to answer as many as we can throughout this session today. I've worked alongside with JD Miller now for 15 years and across multiple organizations. And today we celebrate the official launch of the AI Handbook for Sales Professionals. We're going to spend some time diving into the book and hearing more about it from JD and what he can share with us about the way AI is becoming part of our lives and how we can best benefit from it. JD, we've seen tech shifts before, but you say in your book, this one feels like 1993 all over again. Why?
So I was a college student in '93, and I went to school at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which was one of the 6 sort of backbones of the internet. And I remember being a student then, and our commencement speaker said, 75% of you are going to be in jobs that don't yet exist by the time you graduate because of this new thing called the internet. And in those late '90s, we kept hearing about all sorts of dot-com things, all sorts of new predictions. What we learned now, almost 30 years later, is some of those predictions came true. A lot of them didn't, but the ones that did have fundamentally changed the way that we work. And so as I think about AI and I started doing the research on this, I think that we're in a very similar place. Everyone has a lot of optimism about AI. For salespeople in particular, we know that about 72% of our time is spent on non-selling activities, and so we're optimistic about what could be. And I wrote the book to help separate the hype from the results and figure out, what's going to be real and what's going to stick for us.
Right. Well, it seems like everyone is rushing to put an AI label on their products. I mean, I've seen ads for things like AI water bottles, AI-enabled toothbrushes. How do you cut through the noise?
Yeah. Well, it surprised me when I began this process, because when I first started researching, I really thought it was going to be learn a little bit about what Salesforce is doing and learn a little bit about what some other people are going to do. And it was going to be a pretty short little research paper. And what I found, I work as a private equity advisor with a bunch of different companies. I started interviewing them and asking, what are they doing with AI? And there were, a huge list of all of these different kinds of companies and products and use cases. So by the time I finished my survey, I had 158 different tools that claimed to be some sort of AI product for sales. And that just blew my mind, because we heard ChatGPT launch, in November of 22, I think. And back then it was just, something that could write an interesting haiku. And all of a sudden, here's 158 products and growing that are supposed to help sellers. And so, they're positioned as doing all different kinds of things. They say they use AI to write emails, create outreach sequences. People are using them to analyze their forecasts and their pipelines. They're defining territories. Our SEs are writing demo scripts with it. And people are even starting to, deploy, chat for customer-facing things or synthetic voice. So what I did is, I took a look at each of those products. And for each of the 158 products, I asked, what sort of person is this designed for? Is it for a seller, an SDR, an executive team, a board member? And what is the process it's supposed to help them do? And so by the time we got done, we had a book there. But I also know that AI is going really, really quickly, and we're advancing really fast. And so if you're any sort of a sales professional listening today and you're using AI, I'd love for you to, drop a link in the comments, because I'd love to hear how you're using AI in your professional life.
Yeah, and I love that you're asking for more of that. Hopefully some of those could be some of those times that AI has gone wrong. So if they haven't had the chance to go actually talk a little bit more about that, definitely take the time to share what might not have worked with AI as well. Your book outlines a lot when it comes to the AI readiness maturity model. Now, for the average seller or manager watching right now, what's the biggest difference between someone just using ChatGPT versus someone who's truly AI enabled?
Yeah, great question. So, ChatGPT has its role in sales organizations. But in general, I think, and probably the folks on this call are using AI in some capacity. They're probably already using ChatGPT. But there was a peer research study at the end of the year last year that asked American workers, are you using AI in your job? And surprisingly, 81% of them said no, not at all. So, we're 4 months later. And again, I think salespeople and especially tech salespeople who are visiting with us on LinkedIn are probably more likely to be using at least a GPT. But a lot of folks just haven't even gotten started yet. So what I try to do in the book is create this sort of, crawl, walk, run, or level 1, 2, 3 maturity model that can help get you going. Um, and so we start with level one kinds of users, people who are just experimenting with ChatGPT, asking them to write, review an email for me, look at all of these different kinds of things. And then as we start getting more advanced, we start to see that, there's AI capabilities already built into the other tools that you're using in your job. It's in your Outlook, it's in your Google Meets, it's in your Salesforce CRM. So, once we've kind of gotten our sea legs under us, we can start playing with some of that, specific functionality. And then I think the most advanced organizations are really looking at how do I develop something really custom and really differentiated for me. And a lot of times that's where we hear people talk about this notion of agentic AI, that I've got this virtual assistant that runs on my behalf. And so those are sort of the phases that we're looking at there. Ultimately, investors and corporations and all of these are really trying to answer a question about ROI. There's a gentleman at Sequoia Capital who calls it the $600 billion question. His analysis, and it was a $400 billion question 6 months ago. It was like organizations have spent $600 billion on building AI solutions. Now we need to start answering, where's the ROI and where's the value? Because we don't spend that much money without getting a return. So we've got to get on that train somewhere.
All right. So in your book, you talk about the Pew Research case studies that shows only 19% of the US workers are actually using AI on the job. Tech salespeople probably a little bit further along than some, but for the folks that might be on this call or the folks out there that aren't really using it, how would you say to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so I really think that when I begin this conversation for myself, I remember a mentor of mine, Jim Wedekamp, who the first time I was leading a team said to me, one of the important mandates of management is, to get work to the lowest cost resource that's capable of doing the job. And back then, that meant send it to an intern or send it to an SDR or a BDR. And I think AI really opens that door even for the SDR or the BDR to say, is there a lower cost resource, i.e. a free AI tool, that can get some of this stuff done? But we're not going to be there until we're really comfortable with the tools. So if you've never used AI at all, you first need to start with some very small wins. Is there something natural in your workflow that will add some sort of a benefit to you? So that might not mean diving in and having AI run a full, 17 touch outreach sequence for you. It might be just saying, I've written this email. Would you please proofread it for me and maybe make suggestions on how that gets better? Once you've done that and you're getting a little bit comfortable, then I think we can start experimenting with some specific business processes. Um, but it's really important that we think about those as experiments and not big commitments yet. I was working with a company that said, I want to deploy AI into our customer support function. And so they had this chat bot built and they had tested it internally and they wanted to release it to the customers. But they learned really quickly that the AI was wrong about 50% of the time. And so, in the experimentation phase, that meant, we had to announce to the customers, thanks for calling our support number. Thanks for visiting us online. Would you like to experiment with our AI-based chatbot so that we could set the expectation really clearly there? And then we also wanted to give them sort of an escape hatch so that as the customer's having a conversation and it's not going well, the customer can really quickly say, I want to leave this experiment and talk to a live person who really understands what's going on. And I really think that framework is really helpful for us to realize that AI is great at some things, it's not so great at others, and it can learn. But before we go all in and like completely change our businesses, we want to start with small contained experiments that we can monitor really closely.
As something that I can even relate to is earlier, as recently as earlier this morning, working on something with my bank, I was asking for a particular letter, and it sent me to their AI chatbot. And their AI chatbot, no matter how many times I said the exact title of what the letter should be, they could not register that it even existed with the bank. So I had to eventually get out of the AI loophole and move into that. One of the things you shared there was starting with the small wins, and that's actually a really great one that you mentioned there. The way of being able to just use it as simply as, how do you articulate emails? That's one of the things that I've seen many people that might struggle with. How do I put this into words in the most concise way possible? Or, hey, I need to explain this to my manager more so than I need to explain it to the person who's actually doing the work, and understanding those articulation differences. So I think that's a wonderful example of where you can use that AI tool in order to get a little bit more understanding and see how it can work for you and help articulate things in a better way. Now, JD, I did see there was QR code on my copy of the book, and it includes a lot of additional material. What's that all about?
Yeah. Well, AI is a living and dynamic thing. And so it's one thing to write a book that says, here's the state of AI right now and some places to think about going. But I also know, as we chat with people, we learn more things, we get a lot of tools, we get a lot of new prompts and new learnings. And so with the book, I've also created a whole set of bonus materials that actually, whether you buy the book or not, you might want to pick up and use. And I'll drop a link to that in the chat as well. But the bonus materials are a couple of things. The first is a 12-week roadmap that will take you from nothing to AI-enabled selling. And I really like this for all of our practitioners and sellers, because it takes 10 minutes a day. And then once a week, set aside an hour to do some more, specific things. But I give you some very basic tasks. Day one, 10 minutes, go try this thing with ChatGPT, see what happens. And then kind of sequence your way through so that by the end of a quarter, at the end of 90 days, you're a fully AI enabled seller. And there's a lot of questions about what AI enabled sales might mean. For me, it's really important that we're using AI for the repetitive sort of data tasks, but we're keeping the human stuff, trust building, empathy, relationship building, all the things that make sellers, valuable. We're keeping those for the salesperson. And so that roadmap is really helping you figure out what are the tasks that AI is going to be great at, and what are the things that we want to have humans good at. Some other bonus materials you'll find there. I've got a bunch of prompts. No matter what your role is, you can go grab a prompt that you can drop into any LLM that should help you do your job. There's a summary of all of the tools that we looked at in the book. I evaluated 158 different AI tools. And so there's a downloadable spreadsheet that you can see, depending on your role, what are the tools for you, what are the processes you might use them for, and ways to get started there. There's some assessment tools to figure out how mature you are in your own use of AI or your organization is. And then, a new place for us is legal and ethical guidance. Laws are changing really rapidly. So there's a cheat sheet there for, geography by geography, the laws and rules that you need to follow. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, before we move on from there, you've covered a lot right there when it comes to not just a 12-week transition program, but 35 AI prompts. Tell us a little bit more about some of those use cases and the outcomes, because it's one thing to know a prompt, but depending on my role, if I'm a seller or a sales leader, what are some of those outcomes that I'm really trying to accomplish or that I would see success with something like this?
So, I think the big thing about the outcomes is AI, when it's done really well, helps you become more human. The best sellers are the ones that can sit down with a customer and really empathize, really develop a personal connection, really do all the perspective taking that says, I'm going to understand your business really well. And so AI, I think, when it's best used, helps prepare me for that. And it might be, taking on all the drudgery of, I'm about to meet Dylan for the first time. It would take me, hours to go find all the information about you and everything you've ever posted on LinkedIn and everything your companies have ever said. AI might be really good at synthesizing for me in 2 or 3 minutes, so that when I sit down across the table from you, I'm able to actually really engage and have that personal connection. It might be for a manager or a developer, doing the same thing for a seller. The best use of our managers is coaching sellers to be better. And that's a really interpersonal kind of thing. But unfortunately, they're stuck doing all the drudgery of forecasting and running reports for the board and stuff like that. So if I can use AI to offload that administrative work, maybe use AI to like read all the transcripts of every call you've been on, then I can be a better, equipped manager to sit down and talk to you and coach you and make you better. So when I think about outcomes, there are a lot, and that is that kind of $600 million question that Sequoia Capital is asking. But for me, it all kind of comes at helping humans be better humans, and then AI being the kind of data drones that do all the repetitive repeat stuff.
You know, it's great hearing you say that AI helps bring the human element back into sales, and being able to have that human connection the right way and how it can actually be a tool for that. Now, you just stepped off the stage at the TED stage, actually, a few days ago, doing the TEDx Normal. Your talk was called Reclaiming Our Humanity in the Age of the Algorithm. Now, I want to show a brief 90-second snippet to show everybody here, and then let's start talking a few questions about what that looks like.
Sounds great.
When I bought my condo in Chicago, it came with a small wooden balcony that overlooked power lines and trash cans in the alley. But I filled it with plants, hung a few bells, and could just squeeze 4 people in around a mini grill. To entertain myself during the pandemic, I made an Instagram page for this place, and I shared it with friends like it was an exciting new bistro that I called the Chicago Bell Garden. Soon after, my phone rang. A plant-based meat vendor saw a glamour shot I'd posted of a competitor's burger online, and they wondered if they could convince me to put their burger on my menu instead. I apologized, explained I wasn't really a restaurant, and hung up. And then I checked the post. It had just 3 comments and 4 likes, but somehow I'd been identified as a vegan meat influencer. And it didn't stop there. That fall, I received a surprise case of vegan cookies at my door, and then 5 pounds of kimchi. Have you ever seen 5 pounds of kimchi? It is a lot of cabbage. Some corner of the internet had tagged my garden as important, and now they were counting on me to promote their products. And so when a spice vendor in London sent me 120 pounds of steak rub, they did it because they thought I would unlock a vast customer network. But the Chicago Bell Garden isn't a bridge to anyone. I'm just a guy with a baby queue.
So, it's a funny story, but it's true. Sitting outside my deck is this little silly, tiny garden that I've, built this Facebook page for. But real salespeople are sending me all of these different kinds of samples. And it's because they're using AI and machine learning to do a lot of that drudgery for them. And so one of the things that I really think about is this difference between, how fast can we go? Because it's really great for a salesperson to be able to like rip through social media and say, what are the new restaurants in my territory? But also, the truthfulness of, is it a real restaurant? Is it worth me spending 120, pounds of steak rub worth, to head out to this, tiny deck that's got 4 seats on it. So I think about this dichotomy of velocity and veracity, speed and truth. And I think that's a place that we really need to, keep working as we play with all of these tools.
The concept of velocity and veracity is actually huge. How does that tension play out for a salesperson who's trying to build trust?
Yeah, so salespeople, it's all about that veracity. Humans are wired for interpersonal connection. We want, we're social people. We want genuine human connection. We want trusted advisors. The best salespeople don't just sell you a product today, but it's a relationship that you've got that goes, for multiple jobs or decades. Um, Algorithms really don't understand humanity. They're really good at pattern recognition, and they've been trained on volumes and volumes of data that have taught the algorithm that if I say I'm having a bad day, it's supposed to say, "I'm sorry, I hope tomorrow gets better for you." But it really doesn't know that empathy. The algorithm is really just trying to push a product for you, and it's looking at your dwell time and what's the information that I feed you that keeps you scrolling through my feed or keeping you going to the next thing. And so, in sales, I think if you let the algorithm run your outreach without a human in the loop, you're going to wind up with these kind of 120-pound mistakes. Or you're going to wind up saying something you didn't mean to say that really destroys your reputation. And so, this is a tension that I'm really excited about exploring more. We talk about it in the book. And then through the summer, I'm going to do a lot of LinkedIn Live events with real sellers, real managers, and vendors of AI tools to really understand, what are they doing to kind of make this speed and truthfulness balance work out for them.
I think what I'm hearing here is this is a little bit about your AI sales fail competition. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just heard in the TED Talk, this spice vendor who sent me 120 pounds of steak rub, had a failure in their AI tool. I am never going to buy, because I'm not a restaurant. I'll go find it at my grocery store and I'll buy one little shaker, but I will never buy, the investment they've already made with me. And so I've actually partnered with Spiceology, is the vendor who had that, to really start collecting these stories about where AI is working in sales and how we can get better together. So I really want to have fun and hear other people's stories. I think it's hilarious. I got 5 pounds of kimchi and all this vegan meat samples and things like that. I know that I'm not the only one who's been on the wrong end of AI in sales. So I've launched a competition in partnership with Spiceology. You can go find it at aisalesfail.com. And it's a place where we're collecting these stories, or you can post them on LinkedIn with the hashtag, AI sales fail. And at the end of the summer, we're going to select the best stories. We're going to send the winner, our favorites are going to get a signed copy of the book. They're going to get some of that steak rub, because we've got quite a bit of it to give away. And then we'll collect here online too, and we'll hear their stories live and share that.
All right. So this isn't just a one-day event. JD, what can people expect from you over your LinkedIn feed over the next few months?
Well, it is this sort of summer of humanity. I'm going to be interviewing a whole bunch of different sales professionals. We've got quota carriers, SEs, frontline managers, really to hear from the trenches. What are you doing with AI? And then we'll wrap it up with that giveaway of Spiceology steak rub. Actually, I see in the audience today, Rich Diekman. He is one of my favorite sales recruiters. I've known him since those late '90s days, and he has this amazing network and reputation of being the person who knows all of the best sellers in the Midwest. It's his Rolodex of personal relationships. That's his huge value that AI can't replace. So I'll be talking to him about the role of AI in recruiting, what AI skills he sees people looking for in the sales jobs that he's filling. We'll also be talking with CROs, Kyle Norton and Mark Cosaglow, who are people in the field running big organizations that are really successful with AI. And then we'll hear from some marketing professionals, some SEs and SDRs.
That sounds great. But today is really all about your book launch. What else do you want people to know about?
Well, today, the book is officially available everywhere that great books are sold. If you stop by my website, jdmillerphd.com/books, it'll link you off to all the marketplaces. But, you'll find us on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. If they don't have it in the store, at least has it in their online catalog as well. So wherever you go get books, you can go find a copy of the AI Handbook for sales professionals. Today on Amazon, though, we're running a special 99-cent promotion. So, to encourage folks to, get started with it, you can go grab the ebook for 99 cents. You can also, of course, get the hardcover or paperback if you're more comfortable that way. And then if you go get any of those books, I want to hear your feedback. What I learned from the publisher is less than 2% of people who buy a book ever leave it a review. And that's really, how we learn more about what's resonating and not. So if you buy the book, leave it an Amazon review. That's, the best thing for me in getting the message out, or talk about it on social media or share it with your friends, so that, we can kind of spread the word and learn about AI together.
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to see one of the versions early on and get it onto my Kindle. And as you can see, I've actually already got my hardbound version of it as well. So really excited about that. Now, JD, final word on AI.
So AI is not going to eliminate the sales profession. I know there are a lot of people talking about, is my job going to be automated out of existence? And for sellers who, our value is in that human connection, AI is not going to eliminate that. But it is going to leave you behind if you're a seller who's not embracing AI. The world continues to spin forward and evolve and get smarter and faster. And so using this book will help you figure out the drudgery and the routine stuff that you can, send off to AI to reclaim your time, and then use that time to really double down on the human things of persuasion, perspective taking, relationship building and trust.
Awesome. Well, JD, thanks again for being able to spend time with me today. For everyone out there today, take the time, go grab the AI Handbook for Sales Professionals on Amazon today. You can also head to jdmillerphd.com for the bonus materials and over 140 additional tool spreadsheets you can use there. Also, don't forget to comment on aisalesfail.com below so that you can enter the contest to win. And we look forward to seeing everybody this summer. Have a great one.
Thanks so much.